Okay, just very briefly, unless everything was audible, you're warmly welcome to join the Africa Day celebrations. I know there are events in all parts of the world today, and we are so happy to join chain of events arranged today to commemorate the establishment of the African Union. A few words about today. The next slide, please. So why Africa and why today? In 1964, the Organization of African Unity was established. 63, I'm sorry. The organization is known as the African Union these days. Each year, the African Union chooses a specific theme that the year focuses on through different events, through policy advocacy, activities, and so on. This year's theme is nutrition. And we in educational sciences, we're thinking, what is the link between education and nutrition? We had interesting conversations about this, and of course, when we take this to the metaphoric level, I think it becomes quite evident that we as educators are there to nourish and understanding, sharing of knowledge, producing knowledge, and so on. So education is very much about nourishment. I think Africa has become, I would say, finally a little more visible in the Finnish society. With the lead from the EU's Africa strategy, we have published our first national Africa strategy last year that focuses on looking into the political and economic partnerships with the African continent. And this is definitely a big step away from how Africa has previously been considered more as a recipient or a source of things. I think now the emphasis is very much on partnerships. Each sectoral ministry of the government has prepared their own action plans to implement the Africa strategy. Ministry of Education and Culture, that is closest to us in higher education sector, has just published its own action plan on how to take the Africa strategy forward in the coming years. So I do recommend you to take a look at these two documents. As part of all this, the Ministry of Education and Culture has initiated new global pilots for the higher education institutions. And this is one of the reasons we are gathering here today with hopefully some new energy and new resources for the collaboration. The Global Innovation Network for Teaching and Learning is a network of 20 Finnish higher education institutions, and one of the regional networks focuses on Africa, and this is what we are here for today. And also in our Africa networks, we very much look into the quality of partnerships that we develop with universities in the various African countries. The next slide is a very short introduction to the GINTL, the Global Innovation Network for Teaching and Learning, but I do encourage you to visit our website and get familiar with the different kind of activities do in the regions of Africa, China, and India in the area of educational sciences. But this is just to remind that we are not in this alone, and we are very part of a very much wider network of actors who are engaging in collaboration with African countries. This morning we have two different program slots. The first one is to showcase some of our ongoing collaborations as a faculty in different different African universities, and also to hear about the kind of research that we have completed in educational sciences on education development in Africa. Then we'll have a short break and a highly recommended language taster in Swahili language. And after the break, we focus for another hour to the practical means to enhance our knowledge and experience on Africa. We have two wonderful students talking about their experiences of mobility, and we'll also have mobility services talk about exchange opportunities for students and staff. And we will be presenting some examples on how to start learning about global development, education development, and Africa as part of the university studies. So we hope the morning will open up some new perspectives and ideas on how each of us could engage. So once again, welcome, and can I ask Nico to start the other slideshow where we have the ongoing collaborations of our faculty put together, so we can keep playing that in the background. And now it's my pleasure to invite Professor Pirjo Aunio, who has a very exciting collaboration with Johannesburg University, to share some of her experiences on how it all started and where has it taken you in the past years. So welcome, Pirjo. Could I ask you to introduce yourself first and tell us what you are doing in general in your professorship, and then you can take us to how it all started in this South Africa collaboration.
Thank you very much. Is this okay? Yeah, okay. Good morning. My name is Pirjo Aunio, and I'm a professor in special education here in the University of Helsinki. And my main topic is mathematical learning difficulties. I have expertise in making assessment tools and making intervention programs for teachers to use with kids who struggle with learning. And what I do in Africa is I do the same as here. So science, I do science related to assessment tools and intervention programs, so that it would benefit also the African. So basically that.
Thank you for setting the scene. I would like to hear why and how did you engage in this collaboration in South Africa? How did it all start?
Most of the funniest things in the world by accident. I was working with something else in my office, and suddenly Elizabeth, professor from University of Johannesburg, came into my room and say, "May I interrupt you?" And I said, "Well, yes." My door was open, and she introduced herself, saying that she's a professor from early education and from Johannesburg, and she had read all my papers about math assessment, math learning difficulties, and math intervention, and she would like to collaborate. And I'm quite fast person, so I said, "Yes, that's nice, let's do it." And that's how it started. So by accident, she kind of came into my room. I was there. Of course, we had done background work, but from my point of view, it was a sudden event in my life, but it has become very important part of my life.
Thank you, Pirjo. I think this is a very, very common story, especially for long-lasting, meaningful partnerships. It does start with between people who do interesting things, who share the interests, and then at some point the collaboration may become more institutional, but it is very often that we start by sharing mutual interests as professionals, and I think that's a wonderful starting point for things. When did you actually, when did this moment happen? How many years ago was it? Because then I will ask my next question.
Oh, yeah, well, in this age, everything was about 10 or 20 or 25 years ago. I think this is more around 8 years ago. So actually quite long, but quite kind of, how I say, regular collaboration. So it started with kind of a low speed, which is good because we have been building up the things. And now it's kind of stepping forward with kind of faster tempo.
Thank you. We are getting advice to keep the mic close. Yes, I think I can hear the difference now. Recalling that time between 5 to 8 years ago, what were your initial expectations? Like, what may have you anticipated in terms of this partnership? What was in it there for you?
Well, I have experience living in Asia and living in Europe in different countries. And so what I learned in life, don't expect anything, then you probably will win. And that's how I live my life. So I didn't have high expectation, high kind of wishing for kind of remarks or something like that. It started like the collaboration. Let's do an assessment tool, or let's do an intervention study and test if our work is beneficial in African context. So in a sense, it was how life goes, that when you trust people, you start to collaborate with them, you work hard, you get a lot of things. And also here, just to remark, one of my most cited paper at the moment is growing with one of these interventions that I did in South Africa. So it's for me, it's science, first of all, good science and collaboration with different people. I find it very important.
So I hear that some of the experiments then turned out quite well, and they have resulted in something very concrete and workable, and that's what gives meaning to the continuation. When we speak about Africa collaboration, we often need to speak about the funding conditions. I would be curious to know how your collaboration has been funded. I'm sure it's not a single story.
I try to be very short. Actually, so far, it has been funded by University of Johannesburg, the Faculty of Education, and also one part is the chair that Elizabeth has. So funding has been coming from there, and the major funding, and also the faculty has funded it from there, so in Johannesburg. So the thing what have been done in Finland has been done as part of our work, so no funding from here, but from African funding we have been able to collect the data, test the intervention things, and so that's what we have, and really not big budget, let's say, to be frank. So a lot of work without payment. And now we have the small funding from University of Helsinki, but that's the first which comes from here. So basically with African money, we have been doing everything so far.
Thank you very much. I think it's a good reminder that we don't always need huge funding in order to be able to do a research together, especially. I mean, if we share the interest, many of us can do it as part of our regular duties. So probably something good to remember also. And starting slowly and starting small, as you said, is often a very good strategy. Now thinking back to these few years, what has surprised you the most in this collaboration?
Well, I think what is very nice thing that my colleagues in South Africa are so positive all the time. So even though we have had hard times with data collection, we have to computerize tests that didn't work, the buttons were in the wrong order, so we had to start the whole thing again. And So a lot of drawbacks and no funding and schools kind of not accepting the researchers to come in. Still, they kind of always is this kind of attitude that we can do it and we do it. And I think that's one that I like a lot. I don't know if it surprised me because I didn't expect anything, but it has been kind of nice to see that this kind of let's do it mentality is there, which I like a lot. What is kind of I think that you want to hear the negative things as well. So one of the negative things is that working with such a long distance, so me being here and my group being here and their group being there, is this kind of interval training that we do, that we run very fast for a couple of weeks and then we stop running. Meaning that we do the data collection in 2 weeks and then nothing happens. And then it kind of, it's sometimes take time to get people to get the data feed and analyze. And so that's kind of, and I think it comes from the different working style of the groups. It's not necessarily that this is group in Johannesburg and group in Helsinki, but probably the group in Helsinki is more like me, meaning quite fast and quite hard working in a phase that I see the results coming up. So I think that's more this distance than other ones, but that has been kind of hard for me to learn to wait. I'm really impatient person. So that's the thing.
Thank you for sharing that. Maybe a follow-up question. Now that the global pandemic made us stand still for 2 years and there was no travel, was there anything new that you learned about overcoming the distance, and did your ways of working change because of the fact that we simply could not travel back or forth?
Well, no, on the basic level between the researchers, no, because we did have meetings in Zoom and Teams before that as well. But I think that it made us realize that we can have a situation in children's life when they don't have access to learning. And that's kind of a wake-up call to us, that what do we do then? How do we access to kids who are at home or wherever they are so that they could continue learning? And how we kind of guarantee that they learn where they are when they get out. So we have been starting to develop tools to do the distance assessment, to have an idea how the kids are progressing even though they are not at school. So it kind of brought in a new feature on the work that we do.
Thank you. And I think it has provided many of us quite a stark contrast to the situations on how, I mean, what are the impacts of the global pandemic on education. Many of us who are joining today collaborate with colleagues from very different kinds of contexts, and talking to someone whose kids have not been in school for almost 2 years definitely gives some perspective to the realities here. So I think there's also like a personal opportunity to get some perspective on things. I would like you to summarize what drives you in this collaboration. You have mentioned a few things, but how would you summarize? Why is it that you keep up with this work?
Because I love it, probably. No, I have a big goal in my life, has been quite from the beginning of my studies, that I want to make world better for the kids so that they could learn better. And mathematics, which is my main field, has big significance for kids to be successful in their lives. So it's predicting, for example, educational dropout much better than actually language difficulties does. So that's why I think that math learning is highly important, and I think that's I kind of try to save the world in a sense that I want every kid have possibility to learn better. And why I'm actually a professor of special education and not a professor of psychology, it's nothing to do that I could not be a psychology professor, but in a sense that why did I took a path to special education is that in special education, we focus on understanding learning and learning difficulties. So it's much more than only learning, it's the difficulties part in it, but also how the practical life can be modified the way that the kids learn better. So in special education, it's kind of an inbound thing that we have to produce solutions. I like solutions. I love problems, but I love even more the solutions. And I want them to evidence-based. And that's why the African context is important to me, that I can test the universal law of learning in a sense that what we find in European countries or Asia, does it work also in Africa? If it would be so, then we could talk about universal stuff in learning. How contextual things are, and that's what drives me. I haven't found yet. I have promised to retire on a day that our intervention tools or programs produce sustainable effects in kids. I have promised to retire, so waiting for that day. My group is saying that you never find it. I will say, yes, one day I will find it, but that's my goal, to make life better for kids and for especially their learning, and especially in math, because math has a lot of emotion tied on it as well. So there's a lot to do in every way.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a very, very powerful vision statement for the coming times. My final question before I ask the audience to ask questions is to think about your collaboration in the institutional context. You and your group are engaged in this partnerships. How can our faculty make connections and hopefully also get something new from the kind of work that you are doing? What's in it for the faculty? Why should we know about it, and why should we probably engage?
Well, if I would be the dean, I would look at my track record, for example. They give quite nice papers out of there. But I think that the institutional sense, if we think about I think, well, good science is done in groups, and good science is done with different viewpoints. And I think what I would like to see our faculty to do is to get, for example, the postdoc level of South African or from other countries to come here to learn us how they think, and not thinking that it's only the Finnair is flying only that direction. I think I would like to see that more. And I would like to see us developing research methods together so that they can be done in large scale, what they need to be done in African context. So there is a lot of this kind of methodological issues that we could much easier solve together. And I think that if I would be the dean, I would go on that direction to kind of bring in that research method and topics that would increase our scientific knowledge. So I would kind of strive to that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much for another wonderful vision. Let's start working towards that. We have a couple of minutes for questions from the audience. Who would like to start?
Can you hear me? No. Okay. No. Maybe thank you. It was very interesting for me to hear about what you do. I'm a linguist and more than a linguist researcher. So my question And you mentioned kind of, models of education and whether they are applicable in other contexts. And European models of education are mainly based on monolingualism in instruction. And one of the biggest hurdles for children in sub-Saharan Africa and many areas of the world is that they are multilingual, that their language is standardized, and that the language of instruction does not cater to their needs. I was just wondering whether that is part of the material development.
Thank you very much. It's an important question, and that's one of the research methodological issues that we have been trying to solve. We are working with preschoolers at the moment, meaning that they mostly have something else that the language of the school at their home language, which means that they are kind of at least double language learners. And what we do, we use a lot of concrete materials. So we try to avoid the burden of the language in a sense that we try to teach them in our intervention tools, for example, the very basic concepts with kind of materials to ease up they kind of transition to the English school system. Another thing what we do is that we are heading for developing our assessment batteries in all languages. What we know, for example, in South Africa, we have now one version in 8 different languages, but that will not solve everything, but it's kind of a step forward to kind of acknowledging that there is something else than English going on in children's head. But it's a big challenge, but it's again, I think, methodological challenge, which we have to tackle somewhere.
Okay, are we? Yes.
Audible.
Another question.
Yeah? Oh, okay. It's possible I missed this, but are you working now primarily in urban areas or also in rural areas? Because I can imagine that numeracy issues are really different probably between those two contexts.
Yeah, well, I didn't mention, but yes, but we are mostly now in urban areas because the funding what we have, it's not the massive. Of course, we are doing the testing with the kids one by one, which means a lot of resources. So traveling somewhere to do it would need a lot of extra funding, but it would be very important to do it. We have the same experience in China, that the difference between big cities versus not big cities is huge. And there also we need to kind of start somewhere and then start to kind of go broader in that sense.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And I hope Pirjo has time to stay on for coffee with us. So please go and talk to her after we finish this session. Thank you so much. Shall we give a round of applause? And next, I have the pleasure to invite our colleague Elisabeth Etta to share some interesting insights to the doctoral research that has been conducted in our faculty on education development in Africa. Elisabeth, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. As Anna said, my name is Elizabeth. Okay, hope this is fine now. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about research that has been conducted on education development in Africa at the University of Helsinki, and specifically my presentation will focus on doctoral dissertations completed between 2000 and 2020. The outline of the presentation, first I will give some kind of a general picture of doctoral dissertation that have conducted or completed within Finnish universities. To kind of give some kind of context for the Finnish case, for the University of Helsinki case, sorry. And then I would then narrow it down, the presentations, the doctoral dissertations that have been conducted at the University of Helsinki. We'll look at this dissertation, look at the titles, look at the years in which they were completed, the level of education, and then the dissertation type, so whether monograph or article-based. And then we'll look at national context where this research has been situated, as well as the sub-regional distribution of this research. We'll look at some of the article-based dissertations and look at the co-authorship, as well as we're going to look at supervision of these doctoral dissertations. We look at the reviewers as well as the opponents. That's where are they coming from. We'll look at funding sources as well, and then we're going to finalize this with some remarks. So as you can see, for the period 2000 and 2021, we've had at least 104 dissertations that have been completed in Finland, in Finnish universities. So from 9 different universities. We are talking about Aalto University. It might be surprising, yes, but Aalto is there. Tampere University is there. University of Helsinki, where we are. Oulu, Lapland, Uber Academy, Eastern Finland, Turku, and University of Jyväskylä. So all these 104 dissertations have been completed within these 9 universities. And as you can see, that in 2014, that's where we had our first peak of 13, if I'm not mistaken, 13 dissertations, and then we had the second peak in 2020, where we had 12 in Finnish universities. Look at the percentage that each university is contributing to this overall total. You'll see that Tampere University stands out with 29%, and then we have Jyväskylä coming second. There's no way of ranking, but just to give you the statistics, so please, we are not ranking anything here. And then the University of Helsinki is contributing 10% to this overall total. Let's talk about dissertations that have been completed at the University of Helsinki. So in total, we've had 10 doctoral dissertations, and they have been completed in 2004 and 2017. And you can see, I'm not going to read the titles, but then you can see how different the topics are, and they're covering very different topics related to education. So you see management in education, in higher education, you see teacher education, you see even from the NGO setting, so some kind of work-based education research going on there. And then secondary education related to female students in Tanzania, and so on and so forth. And then the level of education, as you can see there, we have at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 primary education, and then two secondary education. So they have been secondary education level. Then we have higher education there, as well as work-based education. And this classification has been, we've used the UNESCO International, yes, UNESCO International Standard, what? No, I don't remember the name in full, but then yes. And out of the 10 dissertations, notice that we've had 8 monographs and then 2 article-based dissertations. So when we look at some kind of the national distribution of the research context of these dissertations, we see that Tanzania stands out. So 4 dissertations have focused on, or have had Tanzania as their case study or the country in focus. And then we have three dissertations focusing on Nigeria, two on Ghana and one Cameroon. But in terms of sub-regional distribution, so we see that Western Africa is covering 50% of the dissertations that have been completed at the University of Helsinki. So Ghana and Nigeria, so 2 and 3, and then we saw Eastern Africa is ranked as a Central African country, the African Union classification of the subregions. So the two article-based dissertations. There you can see the titles of the articles. The two dissertations had all together. Two of those 8 articles were so authored, and 6 of them were co-authored. And there you can see the co-authors, as well as the co-authors institutions where they are coming. So, the University of Helsinki, I don't know why it's particular. We see Helsinki collaborating more here with the vascular. Then in terms of supervision of doctoral dissertations, we see that in total there have been 20 supervisors coming from 1, 2, 3, 4 institutes. So the University of Helsinki, of course, because we are talking Helsinki, these supervisors coming from the University of Helsinki, and then again, the vascular is there with one. Next slide, let's talk about the reviewers as well. So as you can see, we've also kind of mapped out where the reviewers are coming from, which institutions are these reviewers coming from. And as you can see as well, we have Tampere University producing. Maybe I should not use. I should say 3 of these reviewers are coming from the University of Tampere, and then you can see 2 coming from Helsinki and one. And most of them, you can see that they are from Finland. We have some there from Sweden, from Germany, from the UK. Yes, so that is. Then if we look at the opponent, where are these opponents? That we've had 10 opponents and 2 from the University of Helsinki, and then the other institutions, University of London, guided opponents. Also, in terms of funding, support these doctoral candidates in their research. The University of Helsinki has also. So for data for this, we've collected all the pension funding that the doctoral students themselves have indicated in the acknowledgement section. So that's what you see there. And 3 dissertations did not mention a funding source. So here, assume that maybe this is a reason, but that could be one explanation. And we could see an institution from Tanzania actually supporting or funding this research. By institution. that this presentation any questions as well. We are talking about collaboration, academic collaboration have been produced through this kind of collaboration. And if you think, for example, that the first question is that what happened after 2017? So we've had dissertations from 2004 and 2017. So what happened after 2017 that we haven't had any dissertations on education development in Africa completed at the University of Helsinki? What was the situation before 2017 and what has changed that we do not see any more dissertations being completed? And then the second question is in terms of supervision, because we've seen supervisors coming from other institutions, even from the US, but the context in which these dissertations are being studied, we are not seeing supervisors, reviewers, and opponents coming from those countries or from those institutions. So what is going on? I think this is a question, a valid question when it comes to creation of knowledge and how valid and how credible we think about knowledge creation. Whose knowledge is more credible, if I may say it that way. So I think in terms of supervisors who are here or those who are listening, this is something that we all need to reflect, have a reflection. And then in terms of mobility, how much mobility is, I think Piria also mentioned that you would like to see more students coming or more postdocs and researchers, scholars coming to this way and not just one unilateral direction or unidirectional mobility from Finland to these African countries. But it's also important to question how many scholars are coming from Africa to We've had all the, in terms of concrete collaboration, have we had such collaboration after these dissertations have been completed with these institutions, Helsinki, and those institutions from the context in which these dissertations were researched? So I think these are questions that we need to probe in a little bit more, and probably in terms of collaboration, think more how do we define collaboration when it comes to doctoral studies, doctoral supervision, revision, review stations, as well as serving as opponents in this, in the doctoral defenses.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for the very eye-opening piece of data. I think it is fascinating how many questions arise from seeing these figures. Comments, reactions, questions from the audience. Okay, yes, so I would be curious, thank you so much. I had kind of similar questions that you had listed here exactly on this, how to include people from those countries that are being researched. Of course, a further question may arise, I don't know if you looked at people coming from the different universities, whether it's in Finland or abroad, of their background, like are they maybe coming from the countries that have been researched, or also the ones who are doing the PhD in Finland, are they like native Finns or Finnish Africans or Africans studying in Finland, or do you have that kind of data also?
Question. Actually, when we started this mapping, this analysis, that was one of the items we were going to analyze. But then the question became, how do you know? So it raised more questions than it actually answered anything. So I could go by the names. I could check the pictures, and I did. I did check their profiles, and at the end of the day, I think it was my husband who said, how do you know? Just because someone is Black doesn't make the person from Africa, doesn't make the person from that context in which they are studying. So many people have naturalized in Finland, elsewhere, so how do you know? Yeah, so we had to drop that question.
Thank you. Yeah,
I mean, yes, it is a question that arises, but there's no way for us to really respond. I mean, we can respond anecdotally, and can I just take the opportunity, since I have the catch box, we do have some very interesting research that have been conducted by people who have moved from African countries to Finland, and they have completed their dissertations studying the Finnish education system. I think most of us know the wonderful dissertation by Amin Alemanji on racism in Finnish schools. So, you know, there's obviously interesting research produced, you know, by the fact that we are mobile and we are interested to study new contexts. But doing an overview of that has not been possible, at least until now.
It's already, I went through their profiles and I checked, and I was like, yes, this is it. And then I had a question, how do you know? So I had to question that again, that methodology again. So we had to drop it. Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, related to the final question, one thing that I've been wondering here and also in my own thoughts for the past few weeks, actually, and longer than that, is that like PhD students tend to be the people who have the time to go somewhere else and really do these longer research projects where they can spend the time, but then when they're done, who knows what happens to them, where they go, what kind of a job they get. And I wonder, in general, what kind of models we could put in place to ensure more sustainability in terms of continued collaborations. Like, for example, I still feel terrible about my dissertation. I worked in Namibia and Zambia, but I could never go back because the funding wasn't there and the time wasn't there. And I feel like I've sort of just abandoned, like I extracted and I abandoned. And I wonder what the university can do to sort of make these relationships more sustainable, given the super uncertain nature of the PhD market.
I have a few words there, but I would start by saying that that is actually the next step of this research. So we're going to follow the alumni, where they are, who they are, where they are, what are they doing at the moment, because until we know that, we can't know the kind of collaboration that has continued post-PhD. Anna, I don't know if you have any more.
Well, I actually have a very supporting statement here in the chat for you that I would like to read out. Thank you, Elizabeth. It would be interesting to know where did these researchers proceed and what contributions they are making in Finland or elsewhere. So I think this is another evident question from these, like what happens after these dissertations? And what are the conditions to establish collaborations beyond that? We know the university is very interested in getting the degrees completed, but then what happens after is another question. Pirjo.
Thank you. I was curious, of course, I love numbers, as you probably would have understood already. What is the situation between other countries, in a sense that now we get the picture from Finland? Have you looked, what did Sweden win us? In a sense that I'm a little bit disappointed seeing the figures. They are very low, to be frank. Why are they so, not more, these kind of dissertations done in Finland? And I was thinking that how is Sweden doing? How is Norway doing? How is Central Europe doing? What can we learn from there? Is there something that they have more traditions that we could learn from and kind of import here? Of course, they have different connections to African countries, but still, I'm sure there is some tendency somewhere. In data, there is always tendencies.
I think there's always room to learn from others. I haven't done that study, so I think that is something that we could maybe collaborate. The something I wanted to talk about is about the lives of or the career path of Africans who have done their PhDs in Finland and who still live in Finland and struggling, like really struggling, and can't find a way to continue their research. So I'm also wondering for myself and for others, like, what's going on? I've sat in meetings where we talk about postdoctoral strategy, and then you sit in that meeting, and at the end of the day, come out and you ask the question, what was the strategy? Because there's a meeting about a strategy for postdocs, but then there's nothing concrete coming out from that. So I'm also wondering, what is the plan for the University of Helsinki and other postdocs, especially international postdocs?
Frederica.
Well, thanks for raising all these really important and urgent questions. What I found interesting when looking at your data was that, for instance, if you look at the supervisors, at most universities there is only one person actually supervising these dissertations, which means this is pretty much personal connections. And that cannot lead to sustainable trajectories, collaborations, etc. But at the University of Helsinki, there are 16 supervisors. So that shows there is a critical mass. And I think now we have Gentle Africa, which is great, because now we have actually a regional focus on Africa. And we also have AfriStudy, the Africa Research Forum for Social Sciences and Humanities. And we also have our colleagues in African languages. So I think a way forward would be actually to have a formal collaboration that also leverages our joint expertise to form partnership with African institutions so that this reciprocity can happen, because it cannot be on the shoulders of individuals. Yeah, it's only really institutional partnerships that are the way forward.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose this could serve as another vision statement for us as researchers committed to Africa collaboration, to think how we can join our forces to start developing the structures to be able to host and supervise PhD students and postdocs from African countries. Thankfully, our university has now launched a new funding mechanism for postdocs, which is an important step. I have been in this discussion for around 20 years now, and for this whole time we have been lobbying the Finnish Ministry for Foreign Affairs to start a scholarship program for masters and PhD students from at least our ODA countries, which are like the 8 target countries for development cooperation. That has never materialized. Yes, Sweden and Norway have done, and Denmark have done it for decades, and that's why the figures would be totally different. So it does become political very soon when you start digging into the issue. But I think a more constructive way is to start thinking like, what can we do here in our current positions and with the resources that we have. And I think today's discussion has been a wonderful start for something. And Gentle Africa is always happy to invite people to collaborate on these issues, and we are happy to facilitate the discussion. It is now 11 o'clock, so I wish to thank Elizabeth for sharing the first insights. This is a part of an ongoing study that will be taking forward under Gentle and elsewhere. So you'll hear more, and we'll be publishing something at some point soon. Thank you very much for this first session. Now it's time for some Swahili language and tea and coffee, and we'll continue at 1:15.
It is nice to observe the taster groups behind the glass wall. Frederica, you just have a sandwich in your hand, but would you mind and introduce the concept of language tasters to those who were not able to get a taster today? What is the plan for this initially?
My idea actually was Africa is about education in Africa. And Africa is a very multilingual continent with around between 2,700 languages, depending on how you count. And education takes place mainly in the official languages, which tend to be European languages of colonial origin. But we wanted to bring out a tiny, tiny bit of the linguistic wealth of Africa by just giving you a tiny little impression of two African languages that we teach actually at the University of Helsinki, and that is Somali and Swahili. And the idea behind the language taster is just to learn some basic words, greetings, get an idea of how this language sounds, of how it is written, and how it is really used. For instance, we just learned that actually, if you travel to Tanzania or Kenya and you say Jambo, what did you say? Said, I'm a tourist. You didn't greet, you said, I'm a tourist, buy me everything at the double price. Because the actual greeting is Ujambo, with the answer si jambo, if you talk to one person. So, and this was all it was about really, to give you a playful introduction and initiation. And we're actually very happy that many people took part. So I think this is something that will stay as part of these events. And we can perhaps think of more languages.
Thank you so much for introducing us with the language taster concept. Now, for the next 45 minutes, we'll talk about some very concrete opportunities and experiences of engaging with Africa, and also give you some suggestions on how we can take our learning forward. We'll start with a recorded interview of two of our wonderful changing education students, Elias Mbanze and Alexandra Biris, who have traveled back and forth and who share their experiences on mobility. And the interview was done by Elizabeth Eta last week. So let's watch that one first.
Alex and
hello,
Elias, you're both welcome, and it's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's exciting to participate.
I'm excited. Let's start the conversation by you two introducing yourselves. So if you don't mind, please tell us, who are you, where are you from, and what do you do currently?
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex. I am a student at the University of Helsinki at the master's program in changing education. I am originally Romanian, but I've lived most of my life in Finland as a Swedish-speaking Finn. So when someone asks, the short version I give is I'm a Romanian Swedish-speaking Finn, which is a mouthful, but that's the short version of it. Currently, I'm very lucky to be based in South Africa, in Pretoria, doing an internship, a 6-month internship at the Finnish embassy. It's a traineeship funded by the Finnish National Agency for Education, EDUFI, and it's focusing specifically on education and science cooperation. Officially, I am the Team Finland Knowledge intern, a regional intern actually in Southern Africa, but currently based in South Africa, doing work related to education and science collaboration in the Southern African region. So that's me.
Well, perfect. So from Romania, live in Finland, Swedish speaking, and currently in South Africa working as a trainee at the Embassy of Finland in South Africa. Yeah. Nice to have you again, Alexandra. Now let's move on to Elias Mbanze. Elias, please do tell us who you are, where you are from, and what you currently do.
Hi, thank you. It's nice to be part of this conversation. My name is Elias Mbanze. I am a first-year student in the Changing Education Master's Program here at the University of Helsinki. I am from Namibia, which is in Southern Africa. So it's a northern neighbor of South Africa where Alex currently is. And at the present, I'm working as an intern at the Faculty of Educational Sciences. I am working under the Changing Education Steering Group, through which, under this group, I mostly just review or look through the documents and set up meetings and basically help out or attend the curriculum meetings where I usually just record the meetings and send the meeting minutes and send out the memos. So that is currently my duty. And and I'm liking it, working as an intern under the same faculty in the same program that I'm studying. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you both have your hands full, I can see. Okay, let's move on to talking about mobility. Why do you think student mobility is important? What are the benefits? Why is it important? Let's start with Elias this time around.
Right, thank you. For me, first of all, maybe generally for an expert or for somebody that works in a certain field, mobility is important because it allows you to cooperate and collaborate with colleagues in different parts of the world. When you can move easily and travel to different parts, you can be able to be engaged in projects or learn new things by being able to travel and being able to directly interact with your peers or with your colleagues in the field. And as for a student, for me, I think mobility is important for me as a student because it allows me, or it gives me the opportunity to earn a world-class education at a prestigious institution as the University of Helsinki. So without mobility or without the ability to move as I had done, it would not be possible for me to actually get this opportunity to attend lectures and study in this environment, which is giving me a very professionally and culturally enriching experience. So for me, I think those are the key things that I find that are useful about mobility or being able to move and transition from one country to another.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. Alexandra, do you have the same reasons as Elias, or do you have other reasons to share why mobility is important?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with Elias. I think he explained perfectly the kind of personal benefits of mobility. And I think the ones that we talk about the most are these opportunities to develop your skills and increase your employability. I think this is mentioned a lot in research regarding student mobility, especially. But I would like to, just from my own perspective, as someone who is really passionate about education and specifically the kind of intersections between education and development, mobility, in my case now in Southern Africa, is invaluable because it's all good and dandy to kind of sit behind a desk and read and write, but kind of being in the field and meeting people, people who are experts, people who know much more than I do, learning from them, it cannot be replaced. So that kind of hands-on experience has been something that I know I would not have been able to get from behind the desk back in Finland. In addition to that, and this is also another kind of personal benefit that I think is worth mentioning, although maybe it won't be so kind of academically focused. It's wonderful meeting new people that you wouldn't necessarily meet back home at your home institution. traveling is amazing, and widening your perspectives, whether that is on your kind of topic of academic focus or your work, culturally, in any way. Widening your kind of understanding of the world is something that goes hand in hand with mobility. And then I want to mention, and I think one thing that is really important that I could try to keep in mind as well. It's a real privilege to be able to do an exchange or do a traineeship abroad, like myself, when you have the kind of supportive frameworks of being a student, the kind of financial benefits that come with that, and the supportive networks. Whether that is help with kind of paperwork and easing into things like applying for visas, and all kinds of like bureaucratic things. Doing that as a student is really incredibly convenient. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks to both of you. You've talked about personal growth. You talked about professional growth. You also talked about academic growth. And in addition to that, you mentioned the kind of structures that are needed to support student mobility, such as structures that are put in place by the institutions to support student mobility. So thank you very much for sharing that. We'll move now to another question, and now I would like to find out what are some of the challenges as a mobile student, as someone who is moving from one country to another, from one institution to another, meeting new people in school, at work, in your everyday life? What are some of the challenges that you face? So let's start this time around with Alexandra, if you don't mind.
There are challenges. There are challenges. I would be lying if I said that it's all kind of a dance on roses. Again, from my personal perspective, having lived most of my life in Finland and having gotten used to a lot of different freedoms when it comes to movement, for example, the security concerns that I was informed of course, also by the embassy before I came here, and now also getting to experience them firsthand, is something that I've had a hard time getting used to. This is something that I think is worth keeping in mind, in addition to, of course, like culture shocks and things like that. But the bottom line is life is slightly different, and requires you to be adaptable. So, for example, not being able to really walk around in the city and not being able to take public transport, and having to move mostly by car, and being restricted in that way, but also just in the way that you live your everyday life with concerns of security is something that I wasn't used to before I came here. So this is something that has been a challenge and has been something to adapt to, which has happened quite quickly. I have to say it's an incredible thing how quickly one adapts, and how quickly things become part of your everyday life and they become normal. But it's definitely an exercise.
Okay, so I guess at some point, maybe some other students who might be going for one of these trips would contact you and find out more information from you if they're interested. Yeah, so let's move on now to Elias. Elias, do you mind sharing some of the challenges you've encountered as a student on mobility in Finland?
Yes. So for me, I think the main thing, the main challenge is the bureaucracy in the systems, especially the banking system when I moved here. And, you have to open a bank account. And that was a little bit of a challenge because I opened an account, but then you don't get, for example, you don't get a card. And that time I did not have my address registered in the system yet. So And I think the most challenging part about Finland is how all of these are like the online and the public service system, they are all connected. So like if you want to book, for example, if you want to book a doctor's appointment, you have to log in with your bank identification. Now, I don't have the bank code, so that makes it hard because now I cannot do all of this. So for me, I think that was one of the biggest challenges I encountered in Finland. And also, it was kind of surprising that the administration matters took longer than I had expected them to take. So sometimes you have to call and ask, okay, what is happening with this particular aspect, especially given that I am a student on a scholarship, and when you move to a new country, you need funds and all that, and then the scholarship takes like longer for you to actually get those funds that you were supposed to get. So there were those challenges that I encountered at the beginning.
Thank you very much. We had to cut the interview for the purposes of today's program, but the whole interview, which is like 37 minutes, was it? It's available, will be made available on YouTube, and we hope you can also use that when you discuss with students, friends and students and colleagues about mobility. So we will be subtitling it and sharing it through the Gentle website. As you might have figured, we have two of the people present in the recording here with us, Elizabeth and Ellie. Could I ask you both to stand up and offer yourself to respond to some comments or questions based on what was said in the interview? Simply give them a round of applause. Thank you very much. Any urgent comments, questions at this point? If not, they are both here with us when we close the event, so please go and have a talk. Thank you, Elizabeth, for moderating this, and special thanks to Nico for the recording and all the technical support that was needed to get this across. Alexander was unfortunately not available to be with us in real time, so we went for the recording. This might often be a reality in across. Next, we will hear a little more about some concrete opportunities for mobility towards African countries, and maybe a brief comment about mobility from Africa to Helsinki. Janna, please, you are welcome. You're from the International Mobility Services, so we're happy to hear the latest updates. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I will use it. So, hello everyone. I have a couple of slides. Incoming exchange students as well, so you have noticed that. Okay, I try to, yeah, maybe like this, yeah. So, first of all, we have 3 university-wide events to African universities. I will introduce them late in the next slides, and then we have also this the National Credit Mobility Funding, and that were like sometimes it's working. Would you prefer to use this? I mean, it's big, but it. Yeah. So, for example,
your faculty has funding with the Strathmore University in Kenya, and then we have also American University in Cairo, and in Benin we have Abomi Kalabi University. And not Benin, but the other universities, the English is the teaching language. And we have the student instructions pages, opiskelijan ohjeet, where we have a introduction of all these universities. And if the students want to apply to these universities, they have to plan well ahead, because actually the application time is already in the autumn, in October, and that is for the next academic year. So you have to plan sometimes even 1.5 years before, if you would like to go. So this is maybe a bit challenging sometimes. We have a very long history with all these 3 university-wide partner universities. So, and actually we are happy to have a coordinator from the University of Zambia next week here in Helsinki in our International Staff Week, as well as from Strathmore and Benin. They have a School of Education and many other schools, but students need to be quite flexible, because it's not always published well in advance what courses are going to be taught there. And Lusaka is fairly safe city to be in, and it's very easy to travel to neighboring countries such as Malawi, Tanzania, and Mozambique during the exchange period. And there are not that many exchange students from other universities, but in general, our students have been really happy in their exchanges in Zambia. For example, at the moment, there is one student who is publishing stories in Instagram. You can follow her stories there. Oh, sorry. Maybe Elias, you were from Namibia, or so you probably know more about this than I do, but we have a long partnership with the University of Namibia. That is basically bachelor's level courses you can study there, and they also have a School of Education. Like all these countries, but they have like unique landscapes and wild animals if you are interested in those. And Windhoek is a fairly safe city, and also not that many exchange students there. And sometimes, I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that prices can be sometimes surprisingly high if you have this assumption that everything is very inexpensive in Africa. And then University of Stellenbosch is the most popular destination in South Africa. And there are a lot of international exchange students and degree students there. And in our agreement, the housing on campus is included. Most common time to go abroad is the 3rd year of bachelor or the 1st year of master. And optional studies are the most easy ones to study there. And it's important that the students, they plan the exchange in SISU, in the personal study plan. And they should make sure that the exchange doesn't interfere with the thesis seminar or with the obligatory practice periods. And the exchange is tuition fee, and we offer a scholarship of 2,000 euros per semester to the outgoing students. We also offer scholarships for incoming students, and they can also get the student study grant from Kela. And then we have this short course scholarship, which is 500 euros per course. Oh. And it's also possible to get a traineeship in Africa, like Alexandra was telling. she got the scholarship maybe from the Finnish, I don't know, from Opetushallitus Board of Education, or I don't know. But we have also this University of Helsinki grant, which is very small. It's 900 euros basically meant for the travel tickets. And the minimum length for this is 2 months, and the student needs to find the place by herself or himself. Actually, the students themselves are the best ones to tell about the experience. So I really encourage all the students who are interested in going Africa to go to our Instagram page or read the stories from students who have been in these universities before. And you can always contact us at the International Exchange Services, and we will tell you more about how to apply. But I think from this faculty there has been maybe one student to these universities every 2 or 3 years. Next spring there will be one student from the educational sciences going to Zambia. Okay, so that was my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Janna. Yeah, there is room for expansion if we have one student, one every 2 or 3 years from our faculty who is interested in these universities. So let's all take the challenge also and keep encouraging students to take this opportunity as part of their studies. We know we have some challenges in our 2-year international master's program to fit in a proper exchange period, but we're also working on that, and I think it can be a very good opportunity for some students. I will, before our closing remarks, I will invite Riikka Suhonen to say a few words about global development studies as an option here at the University of Helsinki. What's in it there for people studying education?
Thank you. I have kind of 3 different hats. So right now, my name is Riikka, and I'm doing a PhD here at the Faculty of Educational Sciences, but my background is in the 2 other faculties here at the University of Helsinki. So I've done my master's in African Studies in the Faculty of Arts, and it's lovely to see people from there here today. And then I've done a bachelor in Development Studies, which is now called Global Development Studies in the Faculty of Social Sciences. And it has been a while since my studies in the global development studies, but I still thought that maybe I have some words for possibly interested students to why they should take some courses there, or at least look at their catalog and what is there. So why global development studies might be interesting for students in the Faculty of Educational Sciences. Firstly, you need to enjoy complexity. So don't go there if you want to find easy solutions to global problems, because those you will not find, but you will find much more discussion around the complexity of the histories and legacies of colonialism, capitalism, extractivism. Yeah, there is a lot of discussion on decoloniality and post-colonialism for sure there nowadays, and it was already there 20 years ago. Well, there is a lot of talk about what is development at the country level and at the global level. Again, the complexity is there. How can you measure it? And how can you not measure it, maybe? And maybe it would be interesting for education students to find these kind of connections between the educational systems in different countries, and then looking at the kind of historical roots and the legacies that are there, maybe coming from exactly the colonial background of different countries and so on, when it comes to languages and what languages are used in the educational system, for example. You would also learn about the international organizations that are involved in this policy making and also practice, the NGOs that are involved in this kind of global development work. There are some very practical courses. I don't know if you want to put the next slide. Also, I mean, there's a lot of these very global, big topics, but there are also some practical courses on project management and actually doing the development work as well. And many of the courses at the basic level seem to be in Finnish, but then the more like advanced courses and the master level courses that might then have spaces. Of course, depends, they have the priority to their own students, but hopefully there would be spaces also for students from other faculties in the English language courses and in the kind of upper levels. Yeah, so if you want to explore how education is kind of embedded in these kind of political, cultural, social, historical structures of development, I think it will be very important if you are aiming for a kind of international career around development, so maybe education export or development cooperation that is linked to education. I think every professional in that field should have at least some courses here or in other institutions. For example, through the UNIPID, many courses there as well are very relevant for students interested in international career, maybe in development or education topics. So, and I would also like to remember that there are also other faculties, like the Faculty of Arts, that offers then this like cultural and language studies around many countries and areas. So, please do check out the course catalogs, kind of with an open mind, and see what is there for you.
Thank you, Riikka. You're a living example of an interdisciplinary expert in education. Please feel free to contact any of us who have spoken today if you are interested in thinking more about your future trajectories in international education development. And now I have the honor to call Friederike Lübke, who is the Professor of African Studies at the University of Helsinki, to give some very improvised final remarks to close our event. Thank you, Friederike, for being here with us.
Thank you, Hannah. It's always so exciting to attend a Digital Africa event. I'm the proof because I only wanted to drop in for an hour or so because I have so much on my to-do list, but I just couldn't leave. So I stayed here until the end. And I hope that has been the case for many of you. Digital and I think everything that surrounds global perspectives, Africa, is in movement. We have seen that we talk a lot about moving perspectives, adding perspectives, also creating more reciprocity. For instance, in scholarly exchanges that are truly equitable. And so today served as a very good reminder of where we are and what needs to do in order to advance on our journey towards proper dialogue at eye level that does not privilege Europeans and global northerners or only elites also on the African continent. So I think it was an event that was a real good celebration of Africa Day, because it shows that Africa is important at the University of Helsinki, and it is studied from many different vantage points, so not as a monolithic entity that can be explained in the global north, but as a continent that has a very long history with Europe and that also has to teach us. So actually very recently I hosted a Malian researcher who is interested in multilingual education in West Africa. He also was partly funded by Gintel and gave a Gintel Twin talk and has interacted with many people in the Faculty of Education. And together we visited schools and we visited education researchers throughout Finland, in addition to talking to people here. And what we found was actually that the challenges that face education systems in Africa in terms of linguistic inclusivity are not confined to Africa. The same challenges exist in Finland. So we really talk about global challenges to which only global solutions can be thought as a way forward. And so I would like to thank everybody who was here and who is engaged in this journey, all the presenters, also the presenters of the language tasters, that remind us that Africa also speaks in many languages. So, oops, I need to look this up. Where was it? Mahadsanid, Liban, Asante Sana, Lotta, yeah, Asanteni. Many thanks to the organizers, in particular Hannah and Maria, who I know has been working really, really hard to make this all happen. And sorry, I don't know who you are because this is very improvised. So thank you to you as well.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you for everyone who joined us online today. I hope it was a rewarding morning for all of us. Thank you and happy Africa Day.